Hey everyone! Before we begin today, we want to thank our newest patrons, Allie Ray and Maddie. Welcome to the team. As always, if you're interested in hearing Becca's first thoughts on persuasion, hanging out with us on Discord, or submitting your own study questions, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/pod and prejudice. If becoming a patron isn't in the cards for you right now, but you still want to support us, you can check out our TeePublic store. We just came out with a brand new Stay Proper design that we think you guys are going to love, so check that out at the link in the show notes. And now we have a very special treat for you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Audrey Bellezza and Emily Harding about their brand new book, Elizabeth of East Hampton. This is not Becca. This is Molly. And I am here to talk about Jane Austen, specifically to talk about Emma. No,
You're us.
oh my God.
You know how many times I've done that though? I've been on something, I've started saying Emma of 83rd Street. I'm like, wrong book, wrong book.
I'm so glad it's not just me. Specifically to talk about Elizabeth of East Hampton with Audrey and Emily. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I am so excited to talk about this book with you. Okay, so for our listeners, you might remember we covered Emma of 83rd Street, whenever that was, like last year sometime.
Last May, yeah.
Yeah. And we have the second book from the authors of Emma of 83rd Street, Audrey Bellezza and Emily Harding. And we were so excited to hear about this book originally when you first told us about it. And now that I've read it, I am so excited. So let's just start talking about you two. Do you want to tell us who you are and what you do together in the Austen world and also separately if you want?
I don't think we do anything separately. For the past 2 years, it's been pretty together. Well, I'm Emily Harding. Audrey and I have known each other for years and years. We worked in television together in New York City for a long time. We met in production. And then during the pandemic, I moved down to Texas and we were staying in touch, and TV production was down. And we decided to start writing something together. And we thought, why not adapt one of our favorite books, Emma, in one of our favorite places, New York City? And that's where Emma of 83rd Street was born. And then it was written for each other, and then it kind of blew up. It was published, which was pretty incredible. And then it was popular enough that our publisher wanted a second one. So we decided, what's our second favorite Jane Austen book? Pride and Prejudice. That's where we came from.
Yeah, so this is our second book, and it is Elizabeth of East Hampton, and it is a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And yeah, Emily and I have known each other forever now, and we're just really excited for our second book. And yeah, it's we hope everybody loves it as much as we do.
I'm pretty sure that we all do. I was actually at a birthday party at a brewery like last weekend, and I was talking to someone, and my friend was like, "Oh, Molly has a podcast about Jane Austen." And the person I was talking to was like, "Oh, like I've never read Jane Austen, but I've seen the movies." And her friend was like, "No, no, no, you read Emma of 83rd Street." And I was like, "Ah, in the wild."
I love it.
All we want. We just want someone to meet someone in the wild. That's so crazy. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
It was really exciting. I was like, "I had them on my podcast. I love that book." And, I told them that I was reading your next book, and they were both like, "Oh my god, that's so exciting, like, we have to read it." So, like, your fans are out there.
Oh my God.
Just wanted to let you know.
Wow.
That's so nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we ask all of our guests what their relationship is to Jane Austen, and since you 2 are returning, I wanna know also if it's changed since we last spoke.
I think that when we wrote Emma, we wrote it because we loved Emma, and we thought of her as such a good avatar for us in our 20s, anyone in their 20s trying to navigate the city. So I think that was a really fun experience. But I think as we did Pride and Prejudice, and I think it in general just got more familiar with her life and her story, just everything she went through and her, her journey through navigating, life after 20 and what that means as a woman, unmarried or, trying to be successful. So I think our personal relationship with her as a woman, not just an author, maybe has evolved quite a bit. And I have a broader appreciation for her and the journey each of the books tells about where she was in her life at that time. So I think that's something I've maybe gained more of an appreciation for.
I feel like, you have those books that you go back to over and over, and I feel like whether it's a movie, an adaptation, or a retelling, I go back to these books over and over. I miss it. I'm never bored. Like, I just rewatched the BBC version again of Pride and Prejudice, and when it finished, I thought, "I could watch this again. Right now, I could watch it again."
Yeah.
So, I feel like I just keep revisiting these things like they're just such comfort food to me. So that's I feel like, I'm noticing that as I get older and older that I just love these books more and more.
What was it, Audrey, when we saw the Barbie movie? I think you and I both called each other, and we're like, "Depression Barbie, she watches BBC Pride and Prejudice too." We're like, "We're all the same.
We're all the
It's just a
same.
comfort thing." I know, I love
Yeah,
that.
I wonder what if specifically the BBC is such comfort food. I don't know what it is about it. It just you watch it and you immediately feel like you're wrapped in a warm blanket.
Yes.
Yes.
It's so true.
I had my 12-year-old boy watch it, and he's like, "This is very good." I was like, "I know."
Oh my god, I love it. Well, speaking of Austen content, what is your current favorite piece of Austen content, whatever's speaking to you right now in your life?
The BBC version of Pride and Prejudice. It is so well done. And then I watched the Keira Knightley one, and it is so well done as well. But it's really nice to have so many episodes of the BBC version to really get into each character and develop them. And it's each time you watch it, you're like, oh, I missed that. It's almost like when I watch Arrested Development. I'm like, I missed that line last time. So that's how I feel with the BBC version. Just it's so clever and I just love every character and I see new things each time I watch it. So I just love it. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I think that was when we were doing Emma, we became very familiar with every iteration of Emma. We watched Clueless endlessly, we watched the Anna Taylor-Joy version, Gwyneth Paltrow, and this time around, we watched all the Pride and Prejudice remakes just to see, and it's also very fascinating how the same character is played so differently across. Like, I love the BBC version, but I love 2005 version, and Mr. Bennet is 2 completely different characters, and I love him both in both, but they're just 2 different men, and Mrs. Bennet is 2 different men, they have a different marriage. So I think that that's something that's fun to watch and see how actors and directors see the roles in different ways. But, I do think especially right now with it, the world's a little on fire, and it's just nice to put on something. I'm like, I could put the BBC version on and never tire of it. And it's also, I think, very, very true to the book. There's sections, of course, in the film they had to take out, but now that we know the book so well, I appreciate that there's a lot, like all those little things that they had to, Joe Wright obviously had to take out for 2005. There just wasn't time, but they had time in a 6-part miniseries. So I like that.
Absolutely. This is just because it's on my mind because I literally did this last night for the first time. I played Marrying Mr. Darcy.
Oh, I saw that on your Instagram. I saw that.
Yeah, okay, first of all, it is so fun. It is a perfect game. There were 2 issues that I had with it. One was that Georgiana's, like, second top pick for man was Mr. Wickham, like, you could get the most points by either doing him or Colonel Fitzwilliam. I was like, "Well, that it doesn't track because he ruined her life."
Yeah.
Um, so that was one issue I had, and the other issue I had was there was one card that was just, like, worded kind of weird, and I was like, "That doesn't really make sense to me," but other than that, like, a perfect game and highly recommend.
Fun.
And there was a card that was like, "Mary King is in town," and I was like, "I forgot about her."
Right? Mary King. Also, by the way, like, poor Mary King. She just gets, like, written out. Like, Lizzie's like, fine, she can go with her. I'm like, but what about Mary King?
Do we need a Mary King spinoff?
Always need a spinoff.
Always
Yes,
need.
we can take a spinoff from any character.
Really.
What was the one that I listened to that was Lydia? It was Mrs. Wickham. It
Mm.
was an audiobook. Oh, it was so good.
I love anything following Lydia, honestly. I mean, and we'll get into your Lydia, who I love, in a little bit. But what Austen character do you guys love to hate?
I mean, I have to go back to Emma. I mean, obviously, I think Wickham's the easy answer, but me and Audrey have like this. We agree on everything except for Frank Churchill. I hate Frank Churchill. You love Frank Churchill,
I do.
but I do. I love to hate Frank Churchill. I think mostly because I know you love him so much, and I'm just like, he's such a fuck boy. He's just awful. But that, yeah, I guess him. And I mean, Wickham's an easy answer, I guess.
Yeah, I think, okay, it's love to hate, so I can't answer that I do like I do like Frank Churchill. I think it's probably because I love Ewan McGregor, and that was, like, the first, when I saw that, I'm like, "Oh, he's just so fabulous." So, yeah.
Mm.
But, yeah, who do I love to hate? I can't think of anyone. I kinda love everybody. There's
Aw.
I'm like, who do I really maybe in some of the other books, but we're not in those right now. So, yeah, can't think of anyone.
That's very beautiful. I love that you love them all. I would be remiss if I did not, on Becca's behalf, say that she hates Ewan McGregor as Frank Churchill.
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Yes. Now, we love Ewan McGregor in this household, but she just hated the wig and some of his
Yes,
choices.
yes, and we argued this, and it was because he was doing train spotting, and that's why he had the wig, so there was a whole
Mm,
thing,
mhm,
you know?
mhm. Well, yeah, Frank Churchill is one that I love to hate as well, just because of the complexity of the character and because, like, there are so many things to love about him too.
Mhm.
He's a good I like, you can love him, you can hate him, and that's what's fun about him.
No, that's true. I think the interesting thing with Emma, and we had decided that, is that there isn't really a villain except for Emma. Emma's her own worst enemy, so and that's enough.
Exactly.
So I think that was fun, and I think in Pride and Prejudice, Wickham was a much more clear-cut villain. That he's written to be a villain. What I do appreciate about Frank is that he's not. He could go either way. I don't. I think you could argue both sides, but no one's arguing Wickham's merits at any point.
Absolutely. So, the last question that I'll ask before we dive into talking about Elizabeth of East Hampton is, do you have any new Austen hot takes?
Well, I mean, one of the shocking things, and I think we talked about this with Emma as well, was the ages. Like when you start looking at how old everyone actually is, and I think when we realized that Mrs. Bennet is in her early 40s, like if you actually age it out, and I like had to close my computer and take a walk and like just because that was a hard truth. But I think I have a new appreciation for her as a person. I think that there was an understanding that we had with this. We're like, oh, she's obnoxious and she's loud and she's uncouth, but she's looking out for her daughters in a way that her husband is not. So she's doing it her own way that may turn a lot of people off, but she is actually very concerned about the future of her girls, which I think I couldn't dismiss her like I had previously watching the films that she's just this obnoxious woman. She actually really is worried about their future, which I think was, quite touching.
And in line with that, I feel like as we appreciated her character, because before you think, oh, she is just the worst. She's so annoying. And now you're like, I kind of get you. Her husband, you're like, you're kind of not such a great guy. Like, you're really not so nice to, you think everyone's so silly. You play favorites. So I feel like I look at him differently. I used to be like, I get it. You're right. These roles are horrible. But I'm like, hey, yeah, be a better dad. That's just, these girls really would be destitute without you being alive. So we need to figure something out. Your wife is correct.
And so in some ways, is he a man ahead of his time? Is he a feminist?
I mean, very true. I think they're just much more complex, and I think I think that's also when it goes back to the different versions of the film. You can see like both actors for both Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet played them completely differently, and they're both absolutely in line with what Jane Austen wrote, but it's open for interpretation, which I love.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Donald Sutherland.
Oh my god, I love him so much.
Yes.
Well, on that note,
Sorry, yeah, downer, sorry.
you've already talked a little bit about the concept of Elizabeth of East Hampton, but like, what is your brief overview of what this book is about? And this is coming out a week after your book goes on sale to the public.
Yes.
So I think we can go a little spoilery because hopefully people will have the book by now. And if you don't have the book by now, go get it. We won't reveal everything. Like we'll keep it, a little bit close to the chest, but we'll be discussing plot points. So go get the book and then listen to the episode along with the book.
Well, the book is a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and it's set during a summer in the Hamptons in New York. And it's about the Bennet family. It's about the sisters and the family and their local bakery that they own. It's about the town watering hole. There's lavish parties. There's love at first sight. There's earned love, and it's what happens when two men from two Manhattanites come to the community and kind of shake things up. So, yeah, I don't know. Anything else, Emily?
I mean, that's it. I love when you do that. You do such a good job. I just kind of sit back and let you go because you're so good at that.
How did you guys find that the dynamics of the Hamptons fit in with the themes of Jane Austen's world?
We came to that really quickly. When we decided we were doing another book after Emma, we decided to do Pride and Prejudice, and we're like, where can we do it? And the Hamptons just felt so perfect because it has to be removed from the city because, Bingley and Darcy are leaving the city and spending, the season out in the country. And that's such the Hamptons is that. It's really just a modern, conduit for that story. So that came together really easily. And that whole idea of the townies, as some people say, the locals who live on Long Island, and then the people who vacation in the Hamptons. And the fact that they have to have this interesting dynamic, especially over the summer when you have so many people with money coming out there and how that balances out and how they that relationship. So it fit really well. There wasn't a lot of gymnastics we had to do as far as making that fit.
We had to research, so we had to go out to the Hamptons, and,
It's really hard.
really tough. But we were really lucky to have some friends who showed us around and, took us to their homes and welcomed us and the community there, and we went to the farmers market in Springs, and everybody was just so wonderful and welcoming and kind of, told us their stories, and we saw how much everybody just loved the Hamptons and had such a passion for it. And just, being there, it's just so beautiful. It really just lent itself perfectly to this novel. The more we discussed it, the more we're like, this is just fitting in like a puzzle. It's just perfect.
Were you guys previously familiar with the dynamics of the Hamptons? Like, had you been there before going out to do your research?
Yes, my parents actually met out in the Hamptons.
Oh,
Even though I'm a Jersey girl and I go down the shore now, so I grew up in Jersey, I go down there. My parents met in the Hamptons, so my mom knew it really well, and she kind of beta reads all of her books. So she was a writer. So she's like, this lends itself perfectly to the dynamic that you're trying to express. But yeah, we used to go out to Montauk when we were kids, and they met in I think East Hampton, and she was in share houses in like the 60s. So yeah, we had a relationship with it. And then when you're living in the city, if you have friends who have houses, share houses, you sort of mooch off of them or try to get into them. So, I remember doing Fire Island when I was little, or not little, in my 20s, and going to the Hamptons in my 20s and 30s, and checking out Montauk and seeing how it changed over the years. So yeah, we both definitely had a relationship with the area before we wrote it.
I'll admit that, like, I didn't even think of the Hamptons as someplace where people lived because I only knew people who summered there, and so I, like, picked up the book and I was thinking it was gonna be one thing without actually thinking about, the story of Pride and Prejudice and, like, the class differences there. I opened it up and I was like, "Oh, they live there full time, duh." Like, that makes complete sense, but I, like, didn't even think of that as a possibility. It made absolute sense once I got into it. It was very authentic, the dynamic that you captured there, the towny vibe versus, like, the people who summered there.
The best thing Audrey and I did was we went in the off season.
Mhm.
I think it was like October or something that we went out and we spent a long weekend there. And it was so nice to kind of see what happens there when no one's there. And but it is there's town. Like we met the people who live there and they were, we went to the farmers market and everyone's exist. Some people still come out there on the weekends, but for the most part, that whole summer scene doesn't exist. But the people who do live there year round, it's just like any other town. I used to, my mom's from Boston and we used to do Cape Cod. And I was like, it reminds me a lot of Cape Cod in the winter. It's just everybody's still functioning and living. And there's people been out there for generations. So it's just funny to see how and talk to those people. And that a lot of our preconceived notions, even before we wrote, were kind of destroyed because, we talked to locals. And by the way, who were so lovely. We met so many people from East Hampton and Springs and Montauk who were like, "Oh, you're writing a book? Come here." And they just welcomed us. They told us everything. They were so open and lovely. And we would not have been able to do it if they hadn't been as welcoming as they were. So that helped us just so much. We wouldn't have been able to do this without them.
I love that. I lived in Connecticut, like, on the beach. Well, I lived at it was a theater that has a summer thing, and so, like, Waterford really becomes a summer town, like, very similarly, I think, to Long Island. In living there full time, like, going to the beach in the winter and the fall, like, there's something about it that's just very it's, like, almost liminal, and it just, like, it being kind of not dead, like, it's still alive during the year, but I think I get the vibe of, like, being there and then having all of a sudden your beach is crowded, there's people there, like, you wanted to just, like, sit and read, and now there or surf if you're Elizabeth Bennet, and now there's, like, people everywhere. I really do love a beach in the winter and the fall.
Yes.
I love it. Speaking of surfing, so that's a big part of this book. Elizabeth and Will both surf. Do you guys surf?
No. God, no. No. Although I will say my kids had done the summer before we were researching and studying and trying to figure this out. We were in California and my kids had some surf lessons and the poor guy who was the surf instructor. I swear I had my notes app out and I'm like, so what happens when? And he's like, okay, I mean, do you want me to teach your kids or do you want to like have a coffee? Like, what are we doing here? But I just kind of like had to pick his brain a bit and see, because I think with anything, right? Anybody can read online what it's like, but you need to kind of have somebody who's done it for a while who knows like, oh, that wouldn't happen. And even our copywriter, I think, had a couple things that they sent back and they were like, this is not the proper term. And I was like, Gavin in Malibu said that that's like absolutely how he says it. So we're gonna stick with it. And so, it's just very funny.
I feel like I've never surfed, but I have spent a lot of time on the beach. I feel like I've watched a lot of surfers. I don't think that counts, but yeah, I feel like I'm in awe of that surfing community, and I'm so happy we're able to hopefully portray it correctly.
Yeah.
It was a fun thing to write. I love it. It's kind of romantic surfing. I just love it. Yeah.
It felt like it was your guys' experience when I was reading it. I mean, not yours, but like it felt very genuine coming from Lizzie and Will. Like the way that they both would get out of their heads while they're surfing and kind of it was their creative outlet almost. It felt very real. So that's why I was like, oh, maybe they surf.
It's interesting.
Maybe I should start surf. Maybe I'll start saying that I surf. I sound way cooler if I do.
Just thinking, we're both sporty. I snowboard and, I know Emily's whatever you do, rowing and everything. And those kinds of things do that where you separate from the world and you kind of get into your head and you get to focus on something.
Yeah.
So surfing is similar to that kind of thing. So that's interesting what you were
So
saying.
strike that, pretend it. Oh yeah, no, I surf. I've surfed
Yeah.
for years. Totally. Yeah, it's fine.
Totally.
I recently signed up for a half marathon and
Oh,
like,
wow.
I was not a runner, like, I would not consider myself a runner. I've run before, and I actually injured myself 8 years ago running and hadn't run since then until, like, last year. But now I'm actually finding, very much to my surprise, that am able to do that when I'm running. I just, like, I'll put on an audiobook or if I'm just listening to music and just, like, kind of I find myself smiling. I'm like, "Oh, endorphins."
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I've always wanted to be that runner who's like, oh yeah, I could just like get lost in it. I was like, I can never. Although I guess if you do it in like that's maybe audiobooks is the key.
I do like an audiobook.
That's all I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can go off on audiobooks for a long time. Let's keep going.
Same.
How much I love. Yes.
Yes. So you two changed a lot about the story while still holding on to the essence of Pride and Prejudice really beautifully. So I'm wondering, when adapting, how do you decide what's most important to keep and what elements you can play around with?
I think that's part of our creative process is that. I mean, it is so much discussion, so much brainstorming. And, I feel like maybe because of our backgrounds in television, we're really used to that, just kind of throwing ideas up on a mental board or a Google Doc and switching it around and then kind of getting halfway through it and being like, this isn't working. Why would that happen now? That's not how, they would be, but we need to stay true to this character. Instead of this, maybe she or he should be doing this. So it's a lot of discussions for us to get to where we got to.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too was not so much like staying true to the story, but like what was Jane trying to say? Like what was
Mm.
the like ultimate like where our book isn't quite the social commentary hers is, but we did need to keep that in. First and foremost, we wanted to tell a love story, but there was a little bit of that commentary in there. And, even for instance, like Mrs. Bennet, the idea that she would be trying to marry off her daughters. And I was like, we could keep that, but that's not ultimately what Mrs. Bennet was trying to do. Mrs. Bennet was trying to secure the create financial security for her girls. So if that's her motivation, nowadays that wouldn't be necessarily marrying them off, although she would love her daughters flirting with rich men. but she's trying to create financial security. How does she do that? Well, if you're Mrs. Bennet, obviously it's MLMs. Like, you are doing MLMs and you're going to make one a success. So that was more of it, like translating motivations to modern times. Sometimes they stay the same, sometimes they didn't, but that ultimately saying the same thing, that it was Mrs. Bennet had a motivation beyond just being kind of flighty.
Doing a multi-level marketing. I don't know if everyone, I think most people know MLMs, but multi-level marketing, that's what she was
Yes.
doing.
Scheme. Yeah.
A scheme, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that worked really well, and I know Becca was particularly tickled by that. She wanted to give you props for making Mrs. Bennet an MLM mom. Um, let's talk about a couple other of these like little tweaks and plot lines and things. I really loved Mr. Collins as the idea of grad school, or at least that's what I interpreted, because Charlotte's character, Piper, like the thing that Lizzie gets jealous of her about is getting into grad school, and Lizzie having this like, I wanted to do that, but you're doing it and I have to be happy for you. But I want to talk about grad school in general, like throughout, as like a driving force for Lizzie. If you just want to talk about like how you came to that.
Oh, well, I think it was kind of a carryover from Emma. Is when that
Mm,
discussion we had with Emma was that education was one thing that if it was tangible in Austen's time, she definitely would have had her characters educated, going to college and doing what they wanted to do. So it kind of felt like we were doing that. Of course, Emma would be going to grad school, and of course, Lizzie would want to go to grad school. If any of the characters in Austen would want to be, educated and trying to break free and use education for that, I think it would be Lizzie Bennet. So
hmm
that was kind of the choice of, well, she'd want to be educated, she'd want to leave, she'd want to do something and see the world. So we actually went through a couple of different careers for her. We're like, what would Lizzie Bennet do? Who would she be? And again, that went through a lot of revisions because we're like, it's not working or it's not fitting. And so we tried to figure out who she would be. But essentially that wasn't as big as the idea that she would want to carve her own path through the world. And she was being kind of limited in her ability to do that. So we kind of had to come back to that and be like, well, no, we got to focus. Like, she's stuck there. Whatever she needs to do, she's stuck there. And yes, Piper gets out to grad school, and which again, that was another revision. We tried to keep Mr. Collins, and we're like, Mr. Collins he wouldn't even be a part of the story in modern world. He doesn't have to be. So why,
Right.
no one likes him. Go away. Like, we're fine. You're fine. So
That's why I love to hate. Keep going.
yeah. Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Ugh,
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, it's a lot of like, who do we, characters that are there that wouldn't necessarily be there. We wouldn't, Georgiana was one that we took out. We tried to keep her in, and then we realized that she was becoming just a plot device for us. And I was like, she doesn't deserve to just be a plot device. I'd rather her not be there than her just be this superfluous character that's there for the plot. So, we just took her out for that reason, just to kind of give Georgiana, I guess, a little bit of props, even though she's not there. So yeah, it was just like those choices again of like, how do you give the characters, and also Charlotte deserved to have some agency and decision making there beyond just ending up with Mr. Collins. So that
And
was
being gay. We love
Yes.
Charlotte as
But she
gay.
was. I mean, I always thought, I'm like, yes. I always like that I think there was somebody who wrote a story, it was Lizzie and Charlotte ran off together. And I was like, that's a great one too. I like that. So
Yeah. Another one that I want to talk about, and I don't want to spoil this one for the readers because I really loved this reveal in the book. But so, like, in vaguer terms, the Wickham plotline, we've got Tristan, and there's the blow up that happens with him that, causes Lizzie to be like, I never knew myself, or, the whole thing is different a little bit than it is in the original. So I'm curious about the process with his whole storyline and how you figured out how to weave that story, and altering it and bringing it into a modern era, because I think you did it really well. I was like, yes, without giving too much away. Do with that what you will.
I just remember, maybe you can speak more on this, Emily. I just remember how many revisions we did on this. Like, it took a while to kind of figure out how are we doing this. I think we knew we needed to navigate it the right way, but a twisty way, but it had to be new, but it had to stay. That one was kind of difficult, but I feel like I know I don't want to give anything away, but
I
I
know.
feel like it's kind of like, a friend of mine who read the has a copy of the book and read it, was like, when I got to that one point where it was not what I thought it was and it twisted to something else, I was like, "Oh my god." So, hopefully that will get people excited to read it. Yeah, that was interesting to write.
But I think we knew early on that we needed to. I think it was very similar to, Harriet's the reveal with Harriet and Emma, that we didn't want them to have, like, a blow up or a fight, that it was just a misunderstanding between their friendship, and
Mhm.
so I think that we knew, one, that we wanted some sort of twist, that even as it existed now, that storyline probably wouldn't happen in modern times. But also, it was really important that, like, we wanted all the sisters in it. We didn't wanna, like, not have any of the sisters in the family. Like, it was like they are all like, we all love the character, all of them, even though they are kind of obnoxious and just dysfunctional and crazy. We love them, so we wanted all the sisters, but we also wanted to give all the sisters agency. We all wanted them to be smarter than maybe they were in the original, which is not a fault of theirs in the original book. They didn't have education, and Lydia's 15 in the original book. She's a kid. So, they're a bit older in ours and they're smarter, more worldly, and what would that look like? That would be maybe a bit different, how it would the catalyst for it and the resolution to it. So, I need to be very careful with my words, but it was fun. I think creating them as independent characters that were the same but new was a lot of fun, and then watching them navigate the twists and turns we led them down was a lot of fun. Like you said, Audrey, I think we, like, revised it only because those characters kept growing, kept getting deeper, like, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you know what she should do? Oh, she should actually be there for that, da, da, da," and so then it became this really fun thing that by the end, we were like, "That was so much fun," watching those not so much. I mean, Jane and Lizzie were fun, but the 3 younger ones, that was just we just had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I feel like we really wanted to capture, and I think we did a good job, that feeling of sisters, being kind of like you love each other so much, so fiercely, and you're the only ones who can make fun of each other. You sort of have this like, you can't say anything bad about my sister. I mean, I can, but you can't. But I've got your back and you're mine, and this is our crew. And I feel like that kind of tight bond, while still making sure that we were able to develop each character and they didn't feel like plot devices, that they actually had purpose. I feel like we worked really hard on that and we went back over and over, and I think that was important. So hopefully that resonates.
Yeah, it absolutely did. I mean, that's a perfect answer for that question because it's also intertwined in the book, all of those stories and characters that normally in adaptation, well, not normally, but can often get written out. You guys took and were like, no, let's make them important. Let's give them, like you said, agency. And it worked really well. I also want to talk about Colonel Fitzwilliam actually in this being George Knightley, and you brought George and Emma in a way that's so much more than a cameo. I mean, they are really important to the plot, and it was so fun for your fans who have read Emma of 83rd Street to get that little cameo. I want to know what the process was like of adding George and Emma into the mix.
That was fun. I think that by the time we got to that scene, like, we were trying to hammer out all the other characters, and we're like, "Emma, we missed you, like, we know you, we can put you in here." But I think that was back to, like, we, again, wanted to try to stay close to the story, as much as possible, and I think, when Fitzwilliam appears, he's a plot device. He doesn't like, he's there to tell Lizzie about what Darcy did, and then, she can get angry at him all over again, and, he's there, and then he just kinda leaves. So we're like, "Well, there has to be that character that's there, that she sees, that she has some familiarity with," and so we kind of decided, okay, well, who can that be? And then we wanted them to see, we wanted a little cameo that didn't, it wasn't a sequel that you have to have read Emma to enjoy this because you don't, they're independent.
Right.
But if you did read Emma, a little Easter egg that you're like, oh my God, hey, we know you. So Fitzwilliam just seemed like the perfect kind of, we could just easily put him in there. And then Emma kind of functions as Georgiana in some ways, where she was kind of
Mm.
there and she, ham-fistedly is trying to bring them together, that sort of thing. So
Yeah. Oh my god, you're so right. I mean, obviously you're right. You wrote the book, but I like I was like kind of lumping George and Emma together as the Colonel Fitzwilliam character in my mind, but she totally is Georgiana because Georgiana is always like, this girl Lizzie. Interesting. Oh my god, you're so right. I love that.
I also feel like when we started writing these books, maybe I don't know if it was right away, but at some point we thought, wouldn't it be cool if in this universe they kind of all knew each other? So it always in our minds, like we knew they could be friends or that they were kind of somehow in some kind of social circle. So that was something that we knew we wanted to address. I don't know if we knew that exactly how it was going to work out, and that we do think it worked out well. But it's also when you're writing these characters and you really know them already, like we know Knightley and Emma, and some of the other characters you're developing as you go, and even you get to the end and you're like, oh, we got to change the top. That's not really how that person is anymore. But we knew Emma and Knightley, so those you could easily just write them in. Like that's what they would say. Of course, that they would say that. That's how she would be. So because we know her so well. So yeah, that was really fun to do. I think we both got very excited when those scenes came up.
And I also think the interesting thing is we're like, would Emma and Lizzie be friends? I'm like, I think they would because I think Lizzie would just appreciate this like very forward, strong woman, but also realizing that they're the same age in Jane Austen's original books. And I think everyone assumes Emma's always younger. She's always portrayed maybe a bit younger. Maybe Clueless also feeds into that a bit. And Lizzie's more mature, but they're both 20, 21. Like that, that journey over that year is where they are in both books. So we're like, well, then obviously they have to at least have an interaction and think each other's cool or something. So that was fun to do.
I loved it so much. So now let's talk about our main characters, Elizabeth and Will. What did you think were the most essential elements of each of their characters to carry over into the modern era?
I feel like with Lizzie, I think we wanted her to feel strong and have a sense of independence and, wanting to kind of not care so much what other people think and, kind of I feel like just in terms of her personality, in terms of her interests, I just keep thinking about her walking everywhere. So we're like, let's make her surf everywhere. So there was a lot of things that we had a lot of discussions about what's her personality like, how would that translate now, and a lot of the personality was kind of similar. And then it was kind of adjusting what her character would do and what she would care about.
Yeah. And I think it was that idea of that the idea of Bingley's sister comments on like her petticoat caked in mud and how dare she walk in, and the idea that Lizzie doesn't care. She doesn't care what people think of her. So, we obviously needed to, the walking is now surfing, but she's still a reader, but she reads romance and she reads like whatever she wants to read. She doesn't care what other people think that she's reading. And so I think that was an important element of like, she doesn't really, yeah, people might be like snickering behind her back at maybe what she's reading or what she's wearing or whatever, but she doesn't care. That it's just who she is, and she's very proud of that. So I think that was a fun thing to do. And then for Darcy, I think he's I think a very hard one to nail down because you're trying to figure out like what makes him. We were allowed to be in his head for ours. So I think that we were allowed to keep him being a little bit of a dick at the top because we're in his head and we know he's not really who he is. He's just more of an introvert and he just kind of says stuff and you're like, dude, what are you doing? But we know in his mind, he's like, that's not really what I meant to say. And so that was a bit easier because we're like, well, it's not hard to portray him as he was, which is just kind of like stoic and he just says what he says and he's trying to look out for the people in his life the best way he knows how, which isn't always the best, objectively. But because we had that internal monologue, we knew what he was going through, we knew what he was thinking, and that was a lot of fun of just kind of figuring out what was in his head and why would he have done that, and when is the moment he falls for Lizzie? Why does he fall for Lizzie? What is going through his head? So that was, I think, as much as it was difficult, I really enjoyed that element for him to getting in Darcy's head. It's a scary place. It's great, but it's a little scary.
Yeah. Also, jumping back to Lizzie for a second, the walking is surfing, but it's also walking. And I loved that, like, she wants to walk home from everywhere, like,
True.
even if it's far and dark. And you get to see that Darcy, and it's not really a spoiler, but I mean, it's a minor spoiler for a minor thing, but I want to talk about it. Darcy follows her home in his car, like 10 feet behind her as she walks home for 45 minutes. And in her mind, that's so belittling. And she's like, let me live. And in his mind, that's like, I need to protect this girl at all costs. And that disconnect between them is so funny. And it makes so much sense with like him being concerned about her all the time and her being like, dude, let me
Let me live.
have some agency in my life. Yeah, let me live.
Yeah, I got this.
And
Yeah.
him being like, but I care about you and this is how I show it. It's really beautiful. Also, there's a moment, so she's reading all this steamy literature, and there's a moment where she's at work and she's reading it, and she's like, I feel like everyone's looking at me. I was reading the end of this book like on the train, and I had the book like I was like hunched over it, like trying to make sure that nobody around me was looking at what I was reading. I was like, everyone knows. So I felt very kinship with Lizzie at that moment.
We've all been there.
We added an Easter egg in there because we were like, we realized like that is, I think someone even said that with Emma. They're like, I was reading it, at work or something, and I blushed. So I think that the page numbers that Lizzie's reading during that scene correspond with the steam in the actual book. Like if
Yeah.
you look
Oh
at
my
like,
God.
or like the chapter or
We
something,
did do
we
that.
were like, oh, we'll just have fun. Like, because at the end we were
Yeah.
like, that'll just be a fun little thing. Because it is. It's like you just have those moments where you don't expect it, and also you're like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by
You're like,
people.
everybody, be quiet.
Yeah, everyone, shut up.
Don't look at me.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Wow. Well, it worked. So, who is your favorite character to adapt?
I think Lizzie. For me, I think Lizzie was so much fun. I think there was so much to think about. Like what are her hobbies? What does she like? Like what's her relationship with Jane? How they're so close, like that sisterly bond. I thought that was so much fun. The way she reacts to Bertie Carrington, to Catherine DeBoog, to Bertie. And I feel like that was really fun. And then like just figuring out like her clothes and the band she likes. And I feel like she was just such a fun character. Like Emily and I, right, we put together these character sheets of like who's the character, like what does she like, even if it doesn't even make it to anything. It's just that we really kind of try to round that person out, and I think she was so much fun to do. Like she had like the leather jacket. We got really into that in our when we were coming up with this. She was always going to wear this leather jacket, the leather jacket, the brown. I mean, it's in it, but it was like a big thing, and I feel like in my mind when we were originally creating her character. So I think she was so much fun.
He was great. I think I like Darcy just because I think maybe it's because I had more of an appreciation for him. I think he was just, he was Colin Firth when I was younger, and then it was like, and it became like, oh, he's just grumpy. But she makes him not grumpy. But then as you're reading it, you're like, the guy lost his father, and then his best friend betrays him. I mean, he's had an incredible amount of loss. And so it's like, yeah, it takes him a while to open up, and it takes him a while to, and he's had to watch out for his sister, essentially father to his sister. So just trying to like translate that a bit and like, so we kind of have a better understanding. Yeah, he's still a dick, and he still has to kind of grow out of that and be called out on it, but being like, oh, sweetie, you have actually been through it. And you just, and I think him getting the opportunity to explain it a bit to her, like, I don't think we made a conscious choice. There's, a part where he's talking about his loss, and he can't use this as an excuse for how he's treated people or her. Like, I think it's just like, this is what I've been through, and, I'm still sorry, but, all this stuff. And I think so they have an appreciation for each other, that they both had to carry a lot for their families. And I think for him really digging into that and being like, oh, he is kind of, he has been through it, but also like he's kind. He's not nice, he's kind. And they're two separate things.
Mhm.
So
I think in general, like I'm kind of so all I've been reading lately is enemies to lovers. And I just feel like that was so much fun in this book to have that kind of enemies to lovers and to really see that these characters are good people. And they're both living in their heads in their own way. I feel like that was really the most fun part, I think, of this whole experience. Like having that love story being so earned was was fun.
It was very earned. I also want to give a shout out to Jane and Bingley, who one of my favorite things that you guys did was make them both big nerds who love Doctor Who. I just thought that it fits so well for Jane's character to just be like a gorgeous, gorgeous nerd. I just love that.
we had to, yeah, that was something that we had to, because we're like, she had to grow into it. Like, why would a beautiful woman be somewhat still insecure? And it's like, because she wasn't always that way. And then we also had to make it because it was like, I think we both wanted, like, I was like, what is like the most embarrassing Doctor Who? Like, there's so many different Doctor Who's. Like, who's the one? I think I had to like call my like, cousin-in-law in the UK. I was like, who's the most, if you had to admit which Doctor Who was your most embarrassing, like no one actually likes. And he's like, oh, and he goes through the whole litany. And I was like, okay, that's good. Because even Jane doesn't pick the coolest Doctor Who. She has to pick the one that's like, everyone's like, really, that's your favorite? Like, So she's kind of still also just a nerd. And then even the nerds would be like, that's really nerdy, so she's just not, she's just a nerd. And I thought and he falls in love with her TARDIS glasses or her earrings. And it's perfect. So I think that was a lot of fun to kind of come up with her. And then all different fandoms. Like, remember we were like, what is she into? Oh God, yes, she would absolutely be into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was to think of the fandoms and what she would be into. That was so much fun.
It was so fun to read. So, who was the hardest to adapt on the flip side of that?
I mean, I would say Georgiana, because we tried to keep her and then we just took her out because I was like, we didn't want any character to, especially the female characters, to just be used to advance the story. And I think at one point we realized like that's what she was becoming. She was just kind of a character there to advance Darcy's story. And we're like, that's not fair to do to her.
Didn't work.
So I think that was probably, so, I mean, and that's a bit of a cop out because we took her out. But I also do think that it took us, as much as I love where Mary ended up, Mary was hard. Mary, we took a while to figure out, like, where is she? Because she's so, justice for Mary, man. Like, I love, Mary's great. And I think that she was really, people just don't give her, even by her mom, she's overlooked. So I'm like, that was like, but then what is it now that would translate the same way? So you and I went back and forth. At one point, she was not there and then she was there. I mean, it was hard. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
But I love her now.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, Mary and Kitty both, for me, like reading them, they had the most like new traits, obviously, because they didn't have much going on for them in the original source material, but they both seemed so like true to who those characters would be nowadays. So props to you both for getting them there. They were both excellent characters.
Oh, thank you.
What's the thing in this book that you are most excited for people to read?
I think the sisters. I think, the love story, everybody, it's a love story. It's still a love story. You still get these two amazing characters that you love, seeing them fall in love in a new way. I think I was surprised when we got to the end. I'm like, this is a sister love story. I think we gave the sisters more of a relationship and that they have this by the end. I mean, they all still probably want to like kill each other on a weekly basis, but we get to see them as like a unit that actually still looks out for each other. So I think that was probably one of my favorite parts. And I'm excited for people to read that.
I feel like because my husband just finished reading it, and when he closed the book, I was like, I'm most excited to know what you thought of the epilogue because I feel like, and I will give nothing away, but it sort of is every time I read it, I get like happy emotional tears. It is just so, brings everything together. And there's such a love of this town and this community and the Hamptons. And I think I was like, did you love that? Did you love the end? So he's like, I miss everybody already. Yeah, I feel like I'm just excited for people to kind of get through it and then love those characters as much as we did.
Yeah, I was absolutely like grinning ear to ear while I was finishing the book. I also like I got off the train and I had like 5 pages left, and instead of putting it away and finishing it later, I like was walking and reading it at the same time. And I was like, I'm absolutely gonna get hit by a car. But
Careful.
I looked up every couple sentences just to make sure. But I was like, I look like such an Elizabeth Bennet right now. It was so good, and I'm so happy that this book exists in the world.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
It was,
Wow.
we honestly, I will say that we wrote this one. Emma was written without any expectations. And this one we already knew when it had to be delivered. So we wrote it at a breakneck speed and we were sending chapters back and forth. So by the time we handed in the manuscript, I think we both looked at each other like, wait a second, well, is it good? Like, is it good? Like we've just been writing, we've been heads down for so long. Is it good? So I think when we start hearing people who read it, been like, no, we really, really, really like it. It's been it really is like, I want to burst into tears because it was
Yeah.
a tough year of writing that. So thank you.
Like I loved Emma of 83rd Street, but I loved this one even more.
Honestly, like Audrey and I finished this, and then I think we were on a Zoom and we're like, would Becca and Molly like it? Are they gonna like it? Because really, when we were on with you guys, you talked about Emma, and you picked up on so many things that we were hoping someone would pick up on.
Yep.
So really, like you were our barometer of like, it's good, but will Molly and Becca like it? Like that was the did it reach that like? And it's
you get it.
Yes,
I mean, you don't
it.
have to know Pride and Prejudice to read this book, or you don't have to.
Yeah.
Like my husband, he doesn't know it. He read this and then he watched BBC and he was like, oh, look what you did. like, oh, that's so funny. Like we did it first. And then the BBC, I know he knows that's not what happened, but
Yeah.
so we really were interested, to hear what you think, and I too think this one is, I don't know, bigger, more important? I don't know, maybe just because it's bigger stakes for Lizzie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, yes, I think that if I had a completely clean slate and I had never read Pride and Prejudice before, I would still read this book and it would still be like an excellent rom-com. And that experience was heightened because I know the original story. So like,
Mhm.
and that's so hard to do because there are some adaptations where it's like you really do have to know the source material. Everything just like flowed so well in this book. Like I truly loved it. I read it in like 3 days.
Oh, wow. Oh, Molly, thank
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's all the questions that I have for you guys. Is there anything else that you want to say about this book before we close out or about anything?
See, this is coming out a week after the book comes out.
Yes.
Tell your friends, go buy it.
I will say a huge thank you to you and Becca, because I think
Yes.
we were fans of yours before even writing this book, before writing Emma.
Mhm.
And when we were writing Emma and then we got a literary agent, we're like, what if we were on Pod and Prejudice? Wouldn't that be crazy if we were on Pod and Prejudice? And as a joke, like I think neither of us really thought that was going to happen. And then you guys had us on for Emma, and it was really one of the highlights of that whole
Mhm.
publishing period. Like when we found out that you guys wanted us back for this one, I think we both almost burst into tears. We're like, this is like a dream come true. So
Yeah.
you guys have just been great. And we love you guys so much. And I thank you. Thank you just for existing, because it's such a great podcast that just for Jane Austen's memory and just for every new people finding it. It's great. We love it. We're just so excited that you guys even know who we are, let alone having us on a second time is incredible. So thank you.
Oh my god, that made my heart feel 10 times bigger. Thank you so much for saying that.
Oh,
Oh,
it's true though.
very true.
Well, listeners, that concludes this episode of Pod and Prejudice. Audrey and Emily, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you and where they can find your book?
Yeah, you can find us on most of our information is on Instagram at audrey.and.emily. Don't forget the dots. And so we have some events coming up and podcasts that we're doing. So please follow us on Instagram.
Awesome.
And the book's available any booksellers. Check your indie bookstores near you. Otherwise, there's Amazon, Barnes Noble, all the big ones.
Amazing. Well, listeners, next episode, we're going to be back to Persuasion. So keep reading that. And we will be back to Persuasion for a good chunk of time now. So we're going to really dig in. But until then, stay proper. And do either of you want to say and do something?
Buy Elizabeth of East Hampton. Buy our book. Yes.
Yes, stay proper and buy Elizabeth of East Hampton. Pod and Prejudice is edited by Molly Burdick and audio produced by Graham Cook. Our show art is designed by Torrance Brown. Our show is transcribed by SpeechDocs Podcast Transcription. For transcripts and to learn more about our team, check out our website at podandprejudice.com. To keep up with the show, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pod and Prejudice. If you love what you hear, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/podandprejudice to see how you can support us, or just drop us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.